We are here at AirVenture Oshkosh on the last day. A lot of folks getting tired, but you got a smile, I see. It's either because it's the last day or because it's been a good show. How has it been for you?
It's been a very good show. I have never been to Oshkosh and had so much interest in an aircraft. It is awesome.
Well, that's great. I'm Dan Johnson. I'm speaking here today with Claudius Klimt, and you are the U.S. representative for this very handsome rotorcraft here, which we know as the Arrow-Copter. Those of us that have been privileged to go to the Aero show in Germany have already seen this, but kind of new to Americans. What's been the response?
Well, the response has been absolutely fantastic. I had no idea that this aircraft would attract that kind of attention. In Europe, gyroplanes are mainstream, not so in America.
Yeah, here they're kind of a niche product, but some of that has been because they weren't this lovely. This is a beautiful airplane. Is this built by a company that's got a long history in aviation, or what all do they do there?
This is actually built by a small startup company, but the parts are manufactured by a highly competitive company that makes Formula One race cars.
Okay, so they're integrating some of that race car technology to make it as pretty as we see. What are the materials that it uses in it?
This uses carbon fiber, pre-preg, autoclaved, and it's the most expensive, the lightest, and the toughest material that we know of so far today. Now, it meets the kit requirements for the United States. There's a gyroplane checklist for 51%, and this aircraft not only meets the checklist, it meets it in spirit as well as in fact.
Okay, and I understand that this particular one is one you personally built. Is that right, Claudius?
I had the pleasure of building this with my two sons.
And how long a project was that to do this?
Well, this is the first kit, and we took 5 weeks.
5 weeks? Well, that's pretty quick, actually.
Well, yes, but we had a lot of learning to do, and there's a whole lot of education trying to figure out gyroplanes. My last kit was an air cam.
I was just going to ask you if you'd built a kit before. So, okay, an air cam, and I know a lot more about that airplane than I know about this one. I got my twin rating in an air cam, as a matter of fact. So that one, I understand, the build project, was that the only other aircraft you built before you tackled this one?
Yes, that's the only other aircraft I built.
So that's one pretty good bit of learning on the air cam, but then you were able to do this. Now, you said you had help your two sons.
Right.
But 5 weeks strikes me as a pretty short amount of time to put it all together.
Well, it comes rather complete.
Okay, tell us.
Because it's a gyroplane. And the gyroplane, for example, the fuselage is a single structure from nose to tail to mast, and it's autoclaved as a unit. So there's no...
All of this is one piece?
All of this is one piece.
Wow.
I
mean, I see a separation line up here, obviously.
That's just a fairing.
Okay.
That's just a fairing. The mast inside of that, which you can see on top, is a really strong mast. You know, one of the things, gyroplanes, this is certified in Austria.
Okay.
The ASTM standards took the B-Car Section T standards. That's the British rules, which are the most
They're very
rigorous.
difficult, I know, yes.
They put 7,500 pounds of weight in this fuselage, and then they lifted it up by the rotor.
Wow. That's a little more than it's supposed to carry all the time, I guess.
That's a 1,320 pound
Yeah, I was just going to say,
okay?
give us a couple of the specs about it. 1,320 we know. What are typical speeds and
cruise speed is 100.
100, okay.
V&E,
100 knots.
100 miles per hour.
100 miles per hour, okay.
V&E is 121.
Okay.
Slow speed, 18. 18 behind the power curve.
Now, do you call an aircraft like this a rotary wing? Do you say that it stalls?
It cannot stall.
It cannot stall.
And because of that, it should be one of the safest aircraft around.
So what is the typical, for someone who says, wow, let's assume they can build it, and that's not an issue for them at all, but the flying of it, what's the experience like to fly this compared to, you've flown an air cam, obviously, so that's quite a bit of a different animal than this, I'm guessing, but tell me how the difference.
The flight envelope of this aircraft is very close to an air cam.
Is that right?
Yeah, except there are a few differences. For example, you have to pre-rotate the rotor on the ground.
Okay. And some of them have a mechanism for doing that. Can you spin it up while you're just sitting still?
So on the end of the runway, you run it up. You get it up to 280 RPM.
Okay.
Then you disengage the engine from the pre-rotator.
From the pre-rotator, okay.
Right?
Okay.
And then you tilt the rotor back. Now it's freewheeling, and now the propeller pushes the whole aircraft forward. As it accelerates the rotor. When the rotor gets to 400 RPM, you're flying. That takes about 400 feet.
And that would depend on wind, I'm sure, as well.
Of course.
So,
If you,
just like any aircraft.
this aircraft does wind very well. 20 and 30 knots, no problem in this aircraft.
Yeah, it's a little different behavior because you've got a rotary wing versus the fixed wing that's going to move the aircraft around more in wild conditions. We've seen the fellows at air shows flying routinely in weather that the fixed wing guys kind of go, I don't know, maybe not today.
Yep, this aircraft can really fly in wind. And I want to go over the landing sequence because it's so similar to an air cam. Okay, the aircraft comes in at a glide, 50 miles an hour. Then you flare and slow up, continue to flare, and when you get to 0 miles per hour, you sit down. So, if you have a really strong crosswind, you just fly into the wind and sit on the runway.
You can virtually hover, even though that's not a characteristic of a gyroplane, correct?
Given 20 knots, I can pretty close to hover.
In 20 knots, huh? Okay, so that's not really all that much wind. There's a lot of days when you could probably come in and almost sit down vertically.
That's correct.
Almost. Okay, so we're flying along now. We've taken off and we've landed, we've done those kind of things, we're comfortable about it. Just flying along. How does that part feel to a fixed wing pilot? How can you translate the experience for us?
It's a fighter. You can turn this thing on a dime. The rotor speeds up and you can turn inside of any aircraft around it.
Excellent. Fly kind of like you're used to flying it?
It flies just like a fixed wing airplane.
Okay.
Low and slow is what I love to fly. I love to see this beautiful country from the air. I see so much, it never gets boring. And here
why don't you do this for us, Claudius? Why don't you hop in the airplane if you can?
Okay.
And we'll get a little shot of you in it, and then you can explain some of the interior for us as well. Let's do that.
Okay.
All right, Claudius, we asked you to get inside the airplane. You look pretty comfortable in there. Now, you're, I would say, an average-sized American, which means we all enjoy a hamburger once in a while. You look like you got plenty of room in there.
I got plenty of room. I'm 5'10". People up to 6'4" have been fitting into here.
Okay.
The seat goes back, and it works.
This is, of course, tandem seating, as I think virtually all gyroplanes are. And the aft seat is clearly higher than this one, so the fellow or person in the back is going to have a nice view as well. And it looks like it's about the same height for each position.
That's the general idea.
And it's pretty wide, too. Now, you know, compared to a two-seat aircraft where they talk about 45, 49 inches, of course, tandem is less than that, but I'm guessing this is in the neighborhood of 30 inches or so. It's pretty wide. It's certainly roomy, and in the back, if anything, looks even roomier on a side-to-side basis because there's a slight widening of the fuselage back there. Is fuselage the right term in a gyroplane?
That's just fine, yes. This is a fuselage.
I told you I don't know a lot about rotors, so I don't even know what the terms are.
Fuselage.
Well, and I see a nice panel. You got all the instrumentation you need. Looks like you got a lot of room in there, all comfortable. Now, with the pre-rotator part, that would be one thing that a fixed-wing pilot wouldn't know how to do.
Right.
What is the actions that you take to fire it up once you started the engine and so forth?
Once you start the engine, you can taxi, and the rotor is locked. What you then do is you turn this.
Okay. This is your lock
flight.
to not lock position. Okay.
You turn this to flight.
Okay.
And then you make sure that the stick is forward.
Okay. Which lowers the
Which puts the rotor forward because during startup the rotor is floppy.
Okay.
And you don't want the rotor touching the propeller.
Okay.
So
and then what?
What you do then is you push the pre-rotator button.
That's this green button over here on the right side of your joystick?
Yep.
Okay.
That engages the pinion gear and the ring gear at the top of the mast.
I see. Okay, that
now
kind of like pushing the solenoid on the starter then.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the belt is tightened on the drive shaft in the engine compartment, and the rotor starts to turn.
How long does this process take from push the button until you're up to the 280 RPM that you talked about?
Probably a minute.
A minute, okay. So you got a few seconds while you're waiting.
Right.
But that's okay generally because you're waiting for the engine to come up to the right temperatures too.
Right.
What engine are you using here? You're out in front of the Rotax display.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you got the latest and greatest, is that right?
I do indeed. I got the Rotax 912 IS.
The new fuel-injected engine. One of the few we've seen in this country so far as they rev up their engine of production over there in Austria.
Yeah. It's I don't have to worry about carburetor ice.
That's a nice thing to do. Have you flown the aircraft already?
I haven't flown this one yet, but I've flown the Aircam with 2 Rotax engines, and it has 2 carburetors each.
Yes, right.
And I got to synchronize those carburetors, and I'm subject to carburetor ice. This goes away with this one.
Plus, you'll save a little fuel, we know, from the Rotex.
Yes.
The 912IS said to get about 20% better fuel economy, so all nice things. Well, there's so much more we could learn about this aircraft, and we're not going to try and do every bit of it on this video, Claudius. You've got a website, we can come and find out some more about it. What is your website address? We're watching this on YouTube, we're at our computers.
Okay.
What do we type in to get more info?
Arrow-Copter.com.
Arrow-Copter.com. And I have not gotten, if I have flown the Magni gyro, that's my experience so far.
That's a good gyro.
Another very nice machine. I look forward to going flying with Claudius sometime.
Okay.
Where are you located?
I'm in Baltimore.
Baltimore, Maryland, okay. So I'll have to make a trip sometime or catch you at an air show somewhere. When I do, I'll be writing about that on bydanjohnson.com or bydanjohnson.com. Thanks so much for joining us today.